So today on the Tech Talk, we're going to be talking about which cloud provider to learn in 2022. So should it be Azure? Should it be AWS? We're talking about GCP here. Well, we'll find out today on today's episode of the Tech Talk. So, but John, let's start with letting my audience know a little bit about you now. So for those who don't know you, who is John and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, hi, everybody. My name's John Lunn. I'm a technical architect. I work for a company called BT, BT Enterprise in the UK. Full disclosure, I'm an Azure MVP. So I've been awarded the MVP by Microsoft based on my community contributions all around the Azure platform. So it's full disclosure. I'm not going to be a biased in any sense of the word during this chat today, Kazeem. So, just thought we'd put that out there. So, I mean, my job is predominantly to help BT's customers understand cloud concepts, understand capabilities of cloud, and how it can work for their business. To kind of identify those unique selling points, those things that may help a particular business get a leg up in their own industries and kind of show benefits to their customers. So that's my role. I'm an architect in that space. I touch all three clouds, predominantly Azure. As I say, that is my main focus, but I do come into contact with a multitude of other cloud providers. So yeah, that's me. I'm excited to kind of get stuck into the conversation, Kazeem.
Let's begin with the major players in the cloud space now. I mean, everybody know who the top three players are. But the question I want to ask is, I'm still going to ask you that anyway, so you can still go ahead and mention the top three. But the question I want to ask is that between these top three, are they the same, or is there any difference between these top three providers now?
And do you know what, Kazeem, that is the $1 million question. I suppose that's one of the questions that lots of businesses ask, and I do get asked a lot, on almost a daily basis. And it's a typical consultant answer that there is no there is no real answer. I guess when we talk the top three, for those that don't know, traditionally, for a number of years now, it's been Amazon Web Services has been seen as the top provider. I think they first launched in around about 2006. They got a very strong foothold on infrastructure as a service, so those virtual machines and storage and software-defined networking, things like that, on a cloud platform. And they've got a multitude of big high street names, known cloud-first kind of businesses, all on their platform, and they're an enterprise-grade force to be reckoned with cloud platform. Next up, I guess that's where Microsoft come in with their Azure offerings, which was Azure was first launched around about 2010, where arguably was a little bit later to the game than Amazon. But the thing is with the Microsoft's offerings, for anybody that works in the space, the innovation in the cloud platform itself is very fast with Microsoft, and they've certainly done a lot of work over the last 10, 12 years to kind of help close that gap that Amazon had over Microsoft in terms of customer base. And then the third player in the game, like you mentioned, Kazeem, is Google with their Google Cloud Platform. Now, arguably, Google have got a significantly smaller share of the space, but Google are definitely seen as a big player in data and AI technologies. Certainly with the cloud native, the Kubernetes movement, that all kind of stemmed from Google and open sourcing those kind of platform, or those capabilities out to the wider world. And certainly when it comes to AI and TensorFlow, there's certain technologies that Google seem to be focusing on over and above that traditional infrastructure as a service kind of model. So the end game to that is I really don't think there is any way that anybody can sit down and say that one cloud provider is better than another cloud provider. I think the important thing that we're starting to see now, certainly with cloud native technologies and the ubiquity and the prevalence of those technologies and people that are learning those technologies today, especially software developers and deploying software into this cloud native or cloud born kind of way, is I think we're starting to see that the cloud platforms themselves have got very comparable offerings in terms of IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and even to a certain extent, some software as a service products, again, especially around Microsoft with their 365 offerings. But I think with the rise of cloud native technologies, we're starting to see this kind of blurring of cloud platforms or hybrid compute almost now being just as a matter of not necessarily a requirement to really focus on. I guess the point with Kubernetes cloud native technology and containerization is that it shouldn't matter what that underlying platform is, whether it's a cloud fabric, whether it's an on-premise piece of kit that you've configured with, as a Kubernetes cluster or something along those lines. I guess then the kind of the technological advances of that cloud platform turn more into, I would guess, the other elements that go into, decisions behind why you might choose a particular cloud platform over another. Things like cost management. How much is this service going to cost me to run? How can I secure the service? What are the security feature sets like around a particular service? Do I need to comply with an industry standard? Or do I have a governing body that I need to make sure my cloud infrastructure actually conforms to? So when you filter in which one of the platforms is better than the other, again, they're all at various different levels, and it really depends on what the company or the customer that you're working with needs to have. So, I mean, that was a bit of a broad picture, Kazeem, in terms of where I think we are with three top providers today. I mean, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes, it does. I mean, you just mentioned that they have a lot in common. So since you've been able to talk us through some of the similarities that they share now, I want to ask you again, John, given how much you know about the cloud now, I'm sure each one of them have their strength, right? That's the top three. So do you want to just an eye level overview of what their strengths are? When you try to compare between the three, what would you say is the strength of one over the other one?
Yeah. Well, I'll have a go. And to be honest, Kazeem, this is probably more opinion than fact. I would guess, and it's one of those conversations that you can have, and everybody will have their own view on it. And sometimes that view can be misguided by maybe out of date reports or Gartner reports that focus on one particular area that is taken to mean something else. But I think when you rule out all of these reports, I think my own take and my own opinion and observations of where we are with certainly the AWS and the Azure story is that Microsoft have exponentially grown and closed this gap, if you like, this customer gap over the last, certainly over the period that we've been kind of locked down with COVID and the pandemic. I think today AWS may still just be pipping it, but Microsoft, if not, they're really strong on the heels of customer base. Now, I think AWS's big play at the moment is that they've got a lot of people that are skilled up and are familiar with AWS and how to deploy and manage and scale and monitor and deploy products into an AWS platform, which is fantastic. I mean, bearing in mind, arguably, if you look at the when these products were released, AWS have had a head start on that in terms of that cloud platform, that cloud fabric. I think so. Their strengths, I think, are familiarity. They are definitely seen as an enterprise-grade platform to build these enterprise-grade solutions. They have a reputation, and it's a great reputation for being able to, hold, deploy, store, manage, allow users to consume services across their cloud fabric. So it's a really great story AWS have to offer. I think if we turn to Microsoft, again, personal opinion, Microsoft are very much in the space today, and certainly for the last few years, of they've got this mantra of trying to enable everybody on the planet to achieve more with the tool sets that are available to them. And that is certainly the case from my observation. The amount of innovation, development, features that are being developed and put out through the cloud platform of Azure are phenomenal at the moment. That has a negative effect in terms of skills in order to keep on top of those things, but certainly from a choice and a scalability and even down to things like geographic location. I can't remember what the exact figures are, but I think when you compare AWS to Azure, I think Azure are somewhere around the mark of 60 regions globally in terms of where you'd want to place, where you could place your data center. And I think from memory, I know that AWS was significantly lower. I think they're probably around about the late 20s, 30 geographical regions from memory. And you can compare that to Google Cloud, which I think they're not too far behind AWS, but certainly they're in the early to mid 20s. So straight away, Azure have got this availability across the planet, almost double the amount of data centers available or regions available across the globe. So, when you compare those kind of things, the strengths, Azure certainly has, Microsoft certainly has a massively capable networking backbone globally. They are investing and building next generation data centers globally at a scale that even now they're still putting out news articles that they are building new data centers. I don't think you see too much of that from AWS as you do from Azure. So I think they're the two strengths, I believe. The innovation and the scalability from an Azure perspective is certainly on the ramp up and has certainly been that way for a good few years from Microsoft. AWS, to me, is that mainstay that has been there since, like I say, 2006. So we're looking at sort of 15, 16, 17 years of a solid staple back-end cloud platform for their customers and consumers. Not to say that they're not doing any innovation, but I'm not sure from my perspective. Maybe this is, I'm very conscious of my own bias because I do pay more attention to Azure than AWS. Maybe it's because I'm involved in that Azure space a bit more. So I would compare those two platforms as very comparable in very many areas. I would argue that Microsoft are trying to come up with this innovative solution set way of working with their platform. And then when we look at Google, like I mentioned earlier, Google have got certain niche areas that they are known for. Their search capabilities, their tech AI capabilities with products like TensorFlow and certainly, like I said before, with Borg and how Kubernetes came to be. So and data services, obviously, data services with Google being the biggest sort of search platform in terms of the ability to search through billions of records and give appropriate results for that search term, means that they can handle massive amounts of data, or they've got the capability and tool sets and capabilities on their platforms to manage that in a way that maybe AWS and Azure don't have today. So I think it's a very loose thing, but I think generally speaking, if you've got big data, AI type workloads, people tend to say, well, Google might be the answer to that. But it's not to say that the other platforms don't have those capabilities and those capabilities aren't being ramped up. So, like I say, Kazeem, at the minute, there probably are slight nuances that are probably tarnished a little bit by individual opinion rather than an actual, checklist of things that we can go by. I guess the Gartner report is one of the most well-known and highly regarded kind of mechanisms to try and measure these platforms. But I think the problem that we've got is because of the fast pace of change and development of these platforms, by the time you look and read one of these articles, it's already out of date. I think the big problem that we're dealing with is the education of developers and end users to know how to consume some of these services that are available. Look, let's face it, they're all available across the three cloud providers. So I think when you boil it all down, the benefits that one cloud provider may perceivingly be giving you over another could probably be argued on a different point, if that makes sense. So I think it's one of those things that there's certainly an element of You just have to believe in what you're trying to get out of the platform and be comfortable with working with the platform. So that could mean things like your own internal skills to develop on that platform. It's no good having a team of Azure engineers and then just dictate, no, I want to use AWS because of XYZ. Well, okay, but now you're going to have to reskill all of those workers to use AWS, which may or may not be a difficult thing. But that may have negated the reason that you chose AWS. So there are lots of subtle factors, I think, that build into how you choose between them. But hopefully that gives and like I say, I caveat this with it's all my opinion and my observation, and by no means, because I know this could get into a big bun fight, and I've had lots of bun fights with people with which is better, and it is. And I think the bottom line is that I think that the three main cloud providers now are starting to come up to a level where absolutely they are pretty much comparable. It's more about now the other things that are important to your solution. Cost management, like I said earlier. Do we need to conform to a certain industry standard? Do we need, sovereignty in a particular geographic region? Those kind of things will all come into play now. And again, there's no right or wrong answer there. What may be cheaper in one region, may be expensive in another region, depending on which cloud provider. So I think unfortunately, it's all down to understanding what you want to deploy into the cloud, how do you want to protect it, and how do you need to govern and manage it, and what your budget looks like, and what budget constraints do you have. And once you understand those things, I believe that's when you can start to kind of actually compare services. But just remember that as soon as you've gone through that process, there's a good chance that one of those services may change that would have negated the reason. So I think there's a definite story for developing applications in a cloud native fashion so that they can be deployed to a particular cloud vendor of choice within a reasonable amount of time to do that, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much. So I think you've been able to do proper justice to the question. Yeah,
well, I try. Wait for the comments. Wait for the comments below.
Okay, so let's get into the learning part of things now. I usually get a lot of people ask me, which cloud platform should I learn? And given that I also presently work in a university environment, so I would have some of those students, approach me to ask me, which of the cloud vendors should I learn? So I want to ask you the same question to join. So if any newbie were to approach you, asking you the same question, what would be your advice, to them? Which of them to learn? Should it be GCP? Should it be Azure? Should it be AWS? What would your advice be?
Yeah, and again, it's a great question, and I do get asked this myself a lot. And look, I've already disclosed my bias, and I've already shown which way I went. And my way was absolutely to learn the Microsoft. So I'm just putting that out there, and I'm not in any means saying my way was the best way. Not in a million years would I say that. And I think there are different reasons for why me as an individual has gone down that road. And it was because I was more involved with 365 services. I very much worked for companies that were Microsoft houses, really, for the vast majority of my tech career. So I've kind of stuck with Microsoft as a tech vendor to follow. However, today, when somebody says, right, what platform should I use? Again, it sounds like a cop-out answer, but I truly believe it's really down to what position you're in as an individual, what technologies and companies are you thinking about going to work for, or are you looking to develop something of your own? Are you looking to start your own kind of entrepreneurial escapades and get your own tech startup going? Again, all of these things matter when you come to making those decisions. Now, let's just remember that all three major cloud vendors, they have their own base, foundational, fundamental level certification programs. And they are comparable. Arguably, I would suggest AWS's fundamental certs are probably the easiest certs to get under your belt when you start, because I don't think they're a bit more generic, let's say. Whereas I think when you move to Azure, they're not that much harder with Azure with the fundamentals level certs, but they start to introduce a certain amount of terminology that may be specific to Microsoft as a vendor. And I think then when you move up to GCP, certainly GCP's fundamental level certs is actually quite difficult once you boil it down. So I think if it's in terms of let's get our feet under the table and let's just get our first cloud certification, arguably there's a good argument to start off with AWS just to kind of understand those principles and concepts of what cloud compute is, what different operating models cloud compute is. And once you've learned that and you've got the confidence by gaining a cert, why not move on to the other foundational certs of the other vendors? Why not move into Azure, do their fundamental certification? And I asked that in a little bit of a loaded question. Look, certs do cost money if you don't work for a company that can cover the cost for you. So there are obviously other choices and decisions that play into that. But if we work on the basis that an average cert is that they're roughly about the same amount in cost value, when it comes to the ease of breaking into them, you've got a plethora of free training material available for all three cloud platforms. Again, arguably AWS and Azure are probably a little bit more up there in terms of content that's available, both official content and community created content, whereas GCP is arguably, and I guess that plays into the market share that those platforms have got. It's not that it's not out there, it's just not as prevalent because there aren't as many people working in those spaces. But I think in terms of certifications, absolutely, if you are fresh into the industry, if you're straight out of university, if you've or you're looking to break into tech as an industry, and specifically cloud technology at that, absolutely pick on one of the three. And I don't think it really matters. I think the only advice I would have is that if you choose GCP, you're probably going to have to put a bit more time and effort into studying for that first exam. Whereas if you choose AWS, I'd argue it's probably less effort that you'd have to put in. So it depends on what motivates you. If you choose AWS and you can get a quick win, you can understand some of the basic concepts and you get a nice badge, I would argue that will build your confidence up and then motivate you to move on to the next certification, if that makes sense, Kazeem. I would suggest once you've done the fundamentals level type certification, follow what you feel you enjoy the most. Or, if you've not got a clear direction from the company that you work for in, a specific skill set, we need you to work in this area or that area. If you don't have that, follow what you feel a bit passionate about, what interests you. Because let's remember, I think with cloud compute today, we're in this world of constant learning and constantly keeping up to date with our skills. And my belief, and a lot of other people that I speak to, their belief is that's not going to change. This is the way of life if you are working in tech today. So if you're having to constantly learn, it's far easier to learn things that you're passionate and you're interested in and you're happy to study than things that are not. Hopefully that gives my take on it, Kazeem.
For certifications, which would be your top 3 cloud certification, that are in most demand, right? And maybe your recommendation for anyone that is new to cloud, that is looking to pick up a cloud career, what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess this is the point where I probably show my Microsoft bias, to be honest, Kazeem, because I think certainly from a certification point of view, yeah, Microsoft seem to have broadened the capabilities, and certainly from people that I work with, people that I interview for positions in the company that I work at. I'll go through the Microsoft options. I think the Microsoft certifications are definitely a little bit more rich in their the subject matter areas, I guess. So the first one, if you're fresh into the industry, absolutely take a look at AZ900, which is the Azure Fundamentals exam. There are I think 6 or 7 different fundamentals exams right across the Microsoft stack. But if you focus on the Azure cloud platform, then the AZ900 exam is definitely a great starting point for a lot of people, especially those fresh to the industry. From there, up to, I would suggest, the last year or so, the AZ104, that administrator, the Azure administrator exam, has been very much a staple exam that a lot of Azure engineering, consultants, architects always seem to go for, because, and to be honest with you, even though the Azure Administrator exam is an intermediate or a 2-star, Microsoft call it an associate level exam, it's a difficult exam. There's no bones to be picked there. I've had several conversations about it actually being more difficult to pass than the expert level exam, which is an architect level exam, which is a bit more high level, broader, takes in more of the Azure services, whereas the associate exam actually takes on and tests the fact that you can click and configure and point and deliver a specific technology across the platform. But that's the AZ 104 seems to be a staple. And the third exam, I guess, look, there are so many to choose from now in the Microsoft space. I'm going to mix it up a bit now, and I would suggest that the third exam should be one of the other cloud providers. So that would be my take. So and I would probably aim for that mid-level. I forget what the AWS exam is called now, because I think the fundamental is the cloud practitioner. The next level up slips my mind, but certainly that mid-level, the equivalent of the Azure Administrator level exam in AWS or GCP. I would probably mix it up and say to try and study for one of those, because that way I think you'll get a better appreciation of the comparable features and comparable technologies across the cloud platforms. And I think that is going to be worth more than just focusing on a single track. But again, all subject to opinion and subject to where you're working, the kind of company that you're working for, because obviously there's a big talk about hybrid and multi-cloud, and there has been for a number of years. But I think in practice and reality, that's a lot more difficult to talk about and to deliver in reality than it is to put it on a nice, fluffy marketing slide, because for every cloud that you introduce to a solution, you need to have the technical skills to manage, maintain, and engineer and work with that cloud. And we all know that technical skills are of a demand. So if you're a solutions provider or managed services reseller and you're having to manage those services across multi-cloud platforms, then yes, we have some great tool sets, both from native vendor tool sets to manage multi-cloud and hybrid and third parties, but you still need those technical resources. So I think multi-cloud and hybrid is certainly a better way of putting it. I think multi-cloud, again, I'm not sure that the reasoning behind why people would go multi-cloud has actually come to real life in terms of, traditionally it was things like vendor locking. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I want to spread them across. And I'm not sure that kind of argument floats so well today in cloud, again, especially when you talk about cloud native technologies, that you can quite quickly and easily spin up those capabilities in the cloud. So bringing it back to the certification, Kazeem, I would absolutely focus on a couple of Microsoft certs because they have the widest variety, in my opinion. Well, you can look yourselves at the options, but then I would probably pick one or two of the other certs from AWS and GCP. So that would be my answer.
In wrapping up, is there any other important nuggets that you want to leave my audience with? Maybe anything we missed out on that you want to share?
No, not that I've missed out on, but I'll say it again now, and it's certainly an area that I'm turning more attention to, is cloud native. Cloud native is absolutely affording the ability to kind of abstract away from that underlying cloud platform, which may be a good or a bad thing. I guess we don't know at the moment, but certainly all the movements and noise and talk that I'm seeing, it's certainly a logical move for a lot of companies. How soon do I think the industry is going to move to that way of working, or will it completely move to that way of working? I'm not sure it will. I think we know that generally companies are, the average company is probably at least 5 or 6 years behind the state of the art, if not 10 or more years behind where we are today. So we know that we've got a journey of at least 5 to 10 years with helping companies and customers move from their existing infrastructure. Will that be into a cloud native platform? I think probably yes, to more and more extent over those coming years. So I think learning some of those skills is probably time well invested today. Certainly if you get the chance to flex those muscles and work on projects for companies or customers, I would probably grab those opportunities today, because I think those skills are going to become more and more prevalent, and they kind of are to a certain extent. But does that negate traditional IaaS, traditional skills? No, in my opinion, certainly not for the next 10 years. So I think we're all safe in the knowledge that, yes, apart from having a bit of a steep learning curve to learn some of the cloud concepts and understand how they relate to maybe things that we used to do in days gone by, there's such a massive amount of opportunity for us to learn some of these great technologies. But yeah, that would be my parting comments, Kazeem. That's where I would kind of frame things at the moment. We're on this great learning journey, so enjoy it while you can.
Thank you very much once again, John, for taking the time and for sharing your knowledge with us on today's episode of the Tech Talk. So here's where we're going to call it a close on today's episode. Please do subscribe if you're new to the channel. And from myself and Johnny now, it's a bye-bye, and we'll see you again another time.
Thanks for having me, Kazeem. See you very soon.